The rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Wolf Industries. The city below reduced to smudged lights and blurred movement. Adrian Wolf stood with his back to the room, fingers clenched around a glass of whiskey he hadn't touched. Contract lay on his desk, the words screaming at him even in silence. Marry within 3 weeks or lose controlling shares. Yeah, this is a joke, he muttered. But the legal jargon was ironclad. His father's last cruel twist, forcing him to choose between a sham marriage or handing his empire to Serena, the woman who'd destroyed him once before. A knock. Double quotes enter. Marcus, his lawyer and only friend, stepped in, followed by a woman who looked nothing like the socialites Adrian was used to. She wore a worn leather jacket, her dark curls escaping a haphazard bun. Her eyes, though sharp, intelligent, locked onto his without flinching. Adrian, meet Isla Rivera. Marcus grinned. She's your solution. Adrian's lip curled. A street artist? Isla dropped a sketchbook onto his desk, flipping it open to reveal breathtaking architectural designs leak. Innovative. His style, but with an organic warmth he'd never considered. I'm an architect, she said. And I know your situation. I'll marry you. His laugh was bitter. Why? Money? Connections? Her gaze didn't waver. I have my reasons, but I'll play the doting wife convincingly enough to fool your shareholders and the press. Adrian circled her, assessing.
Ow.
Like pencil lead and vanilla, not expensive perfume. Her hands were calloused, her nails short. Real, dangerous. Rules, he snapped. No emotional entanglements, no sharing my bed. This is business, Isla smirked. Don't flatter yourself, Wolf. I've seen colder men in freezer aisles. Marcus choked on a laugh. Adrian ignored him. Start tonight. We'll draft a contract. Midnight found them still in his office, the city lights casting long shadows. Isla had been silent for hours, her pencil flying over blueprints, correcting flaws in his latest project with quiet precision. Adrian watched her, irritation warring with reluctant admiration. You missed this, she said suddenly, pointing to a structural flaw. In high winds, this joint would buckle. He leaned over her shoulder, his chest brushing her back. Her scent curled into him warm, distracting. You're right, he admitted grudgingly. Their fingers brushed as they reached. For the same pencil? A spark, sharp and electric. Adrian jerked back, but not before he felt the softness of her skin, the steady pulse at her wrist. Nervous? Isla teased, but her voice was breathier than before. Don't. His voice dropped, rough.
This isn't
that kind of arrangement. She held his gaze, unflinching. I know, but the air between them had thickened, charged with something neither had intended. The morning after their first late-night work session, Isla woke to the scent of coffee. She blinked, disoriented, before realizing she'd fallen asleep on Adrian's office couch. His suit jacket was draped over her, the fabric still warm from his body. She sat up, rubbing her eyes, and found him at his desk, already immaculate in a fresh shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He didn't look up. You snore, Isla scoffed, tossing his jacket at him. And you're a terrible host. No blanket. Adrian finally glanced at her, his gaze lingering a second too long on her sleep-mussed hair. You were supposed to leave. You were supposed to tell me where the spare key was. A beat of silence. Then, to her surprise, the corner of his mouth twitched. Touché. Their first public appearance as a couple was at a charity gala that evening. Isla stood in front of Adrian's penthouse mirror, adjusting the straps of her emerald green dress, borrowed from his stylist, since she owned nothing black tie appropriate. Adrian leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. You clean up well? She met his eyes in the reflection. You sound surprised. I assumed you only owned that ratty jacket. Isla turned, stepping closer. Careful, Wolf. Almost sounds like you've been paying attention to me? His jaw tightened, but before he could retort, his phone buzzed. Serena's name flashed on the screen. Isla felt the air turn to ice. Adrian silenced the call without a word. Ex-girlfriend? She asked lightly. Business rival? His voice was clipped. And the reason I can't afford any mistakes tonight? hesitated, then reached up, straightening his tie. Then let's make sure she sees exactly what she's lost. Adrian stilled, her fingers brushing his collarbone. For a moment, neither breathed. Then he caught her wrist, his grip firm but not ungentle. Remember the rules. Isla smiled, slow and defiant. Who said I was following them? The gala was a whirlwind of champagne flutes and flashing cameras. Adrien played his part perfectly, his hand resting possessively on the small of Illa's back. His smiles rare but devastating when they came. Serena found them near the balcony. Adrien, she purred, her red lips curling. I didn't realize you'd upgraded. Isla felt his fingers tense against her spine. Before he could speak, she leaned into him, her laugh soft. Funny, he said the same thing about you. Serena's smile faltered. Adrian's grip on Isla tightened approval or warning. She wasn't. Sure. Later on the balcony, he finally spoke. You shouldn't have provoked her. Isla sipped her wine. She deserved it. Adrian studied her, the city lights reflecting in his dark eyes. Why are you really doing this? The question hung between them. Isla turned away, watching the skyline. Maybe I like seeing the great Adrian Wolf lose control. He stepped closer, his voice a low rumble. You have no idea what you're playing with. She faced him, their breaths mingling. Then show me. For a heartbeat, she thought he might. His gaze dropped to her lips, his body caging her against the railing. But then he pulled back, his mask slipping back into place. We're leaving. At his penthouse, the tension was a living thing. Isla kicked off her heels, watching as Adrien poured himself a drink. His movements sharp. You're angry, she observed. I don't like games. She crossed the room, stopping just inches from him. Then stopped playing them. Adrien set his glass down with a sharp clink. What do you want from me? Isla reached up, tracing the line of his jaw. Honesty. He caught her hand, his, breath ragged. You won't like what you find. She rose onto her toes, her lips brushing his ear. Try me. A growl tore from his throat. Then his mouth crashed onto hers. The kiss was fire and fury, his hands gripping her waist, hers tangling in his hair. The world narrowed to the heat of his body, the taste of whiskey on his tongue. When they broke apart, Adrian's eyes were wild. This changes nothing. Isla smirked, her thumb wiping her smudged lipstick from his mouth. Keep telling yourself that. The morning after the gala, the Kasaila woke alone. The sheets beside her were cold, untouched. Adrian's side of the bed hadn't been slept in. She sat up, rubbing her bare arms, the memories of last night flooding back his hands. In her hair, the way he'd pinned her against the wall, the way he'd stopped just as things grew desperate. This changes nothing, she scoffed, throwing off the covers. Typical Adrian Wolf, hot and cold in the same breath. She found him in the kitchen. Already dressed for work, his expression unreadable as he scrolled through his phone. Coffee? She asked, reaching for a mug. Don't. His voice was rough. Isla froze. Excuse me? Adrian finally looked at her, his eyes dark. Last night was a mistake. Her fingers tightened around the mug. Funny, it didn't feel like one. He set his phone down with deliberate slowness. We have rules for a reason. And yet, she said, stepping closer, you're the one who broke them first. A muscle in his jaw twitched. Before he could reply, his phone buzzed. Serena's name flashed again. Isla rolled her eyes. Persistent, isn't she? Adrian ignored the call, but his grip on the phone turned white-knuckled. She knows something. About what? He hesitated, then turned the screen toward her. A photo her. Isla, standing outside a cafe in Paris 2 weeks ago, speaking urgently. Into her phone. The caption beneath it, ask your fiancé who she's really working for. Illa's stomach dropped. That's not don't. Adrian's voice was lethal. Just tell me the truth. Were you ever on my side? Flashback. Paris, 2 weeks earlier. Alla had stepped outside the textile factory, her hand shaking as she dialed Marcus. He can't know, she whispered urgently. Not yet. The suppliers lying Adrian's designs were stolen before we even got here. If he finds out, he'll blow the deal, and we'll lose everything. Marcus's voice was tense. Then we handle it quietly. Get the proof first. Had nodded, not noticing the shadowy figure snapping photos from across the street. Present Isla reached for Adrian's arm. It wasn't what you think. He jerked away. You were supposed to be different. The hurt in his voice cut deeper than anger ever could. Isla straightened, her own temper flaring. You're really going to believe her over me? Adrian's laugh was hollow. I don't believe anyone. The words hung between them, a chasm too wide to cross. Then his phone buzzed again, a message preview from Serena. She's using you, just like I did. Ask her about the designs. Adrian's expression hardened. Get out. Isla didn't move. You don't mean that? His voice dropped to a whisper. Now. She left with nothing but her sketchbook and the clothes on her back. The penthouse elevator. Doors closed between them. Adrian's icy glare the last thing she saw. 3 days later, Dreen sat in his office, staring at the same financial report for the third hour. He hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, hadn't stopped replaying the look on Illa's face when he'd thrown her out. You don't mean that. But he had, or at least he thought he did. His phone buzzed. Marcus, we have a problem. Adrian pinched the bridge of his nose. What now? Serena just filed a lawsuit. She's claiming Isla stole proprietary designs. Adrian's blood ran cold. That's impossible. Not according to the evidence she planted. If this goes public, Wolf Industries is finished. Dreen stood abruptly, his chair slamming into the wall. He'd been played. But by whom? Meanwhile, Ila's apartment Tila sat on her cramped studio. Floor, blueprints, and notes spread around her. She'd spent 3 days piecing together the truth Serena's lies, stolen designs, the trap that had been set for Adrian from the start. Her phone rang. Unknown number, she answered. A woman's voice, smooth as poison. Did you really think you could win, Isla? Serena. Isla's grip tightened. I know what you did. A laugh. Then you know it's already over. Adrian will never trust you again. Isla. Looked down at the proof in her hands, the real designs, the real theft, the real betrayal. Oh, I wouldn't bet on that. She hung up and grabbed her coat. It was time to end this. The rain fell in sheets as Isla sprinted toward Wolf Industries. The folder of evidence clutched to her chest like armor. Her hair stuck to her face, her boots splashed through icy puddles, but she didn't slow down. Not this time. She wouldn't. Let Adrian push her away, not when she had the truth in her hands. Wolf Industries' 28th floor Adrian stood at the floor 2 ceiling windows watching the storm rage outside. His reflection was hollow-eyed, unshaven, 3 days without sleep. 3 days since he'd thrown Isla out. Marcus burst into the office, his usually composed face tight with urgency. Adrian, you need to see this. Adrian didn't turn. If it's about Serena's lawsuit, I already know. Not the lawsuit. Marcus shoved a tablet into his hands. Look, a live news feed played Serena at a press conference, smirking as she announced her takeover bid for Wolf Industries. The company needs leadership it can trust, she purred. Not a man who lets sentiment blind him. Trian's grip on the tablet turned deadly. She's making her move. Marcus hesitated. There's more. The screen switched to security footage, Serena weeks ago, slipping into the Wolf Industries design vault. Adrian's breath stopped. Isla didn't steal those designs, Marcus said. Quietly, Serena did. She framed Isla to make you doubt her. The truth hit like a punch to the gut. He'd been played and he'd let it happen. Lobby. Wolf Industries Isla shoved through the revolving doors, dripping wet, her chest heaving. The security guard stepped forward. It's Miss Rivera. You're not authorized. I don't care. She pushed past him, heading straight for the elevator. The doors slid open, and Adrian stood there. His expression raw, his eyes burning into hers. 4. A heartbeat, neither moved. Then Isla thrust the folder into his hands. Serena set you up. She stole your designs, faked those messages, and played us both. Adrian didn't look at the papers. His gaze never left her face. I know. Illa's breath caught. You, ... no. He stepped closer, his voice rough. I was wrong about everything. Elevator dinged. The lobby was too public, too exposed. Isla turned on her heel. Not here. She walked out into the rain. Adrien followed. St. James Park, the downpour soaked them within seconds. Isla stopped under a dripping oak tree, her hands shaking from cold or fury. She wasn't sure. Adrien stood before her, rain sliding down his face like tears. I should have trusted you. Isla laughed bitterly. You didn't. You took Serena's word over mine. I was scared. The admission tore from him. Scared of being fooled again? Scared of ... needing you? The words hung between them, fragile as glass. Isla stepped closer. You pushed me away because you felt something? Adrian's hands lifted, hovering near her face like he was afraid to. Touch her. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I. She caught his wrists, pressing his palms to her rain-soaked cheeks. But I'm not leaving. His breath hitched. Even after everything. 'Cause of everything. Adrian's forehead dropped to hers, his voice breaking. I don't deserve you. Isla smiled through her own tears. Too bad. You're stuck with me. And then finally, he kissed her, not like before, hungry and furious. This kiss was an apology, a promise, a beginning. Epilogue. 1 month later, the headline screamed. Serena Vale exposed. Fraud. Theft and the fall of an empire. Wolf Industries thrived. The lawsuit was dropped. Stolen designs were recovered, and Adrien stood in the doorway of Isla's studio, watching her sketch, her brow furrowed in concentration. You're staring, she murmured without looking up. He crossed the room, pressing a kiss to the back of her neck. I like the view. Isla turned, catching his face in her hands. Still afraid? Adrien smiled, really smiled for the first time in years. It's not even a little. The morning of the wedding dawned with golden light spilling over the rooftop garden of Wolf Industries. Isla stood barefoot on the terrace, the silk hem of her dress fluttering in the breeze, her fingers tracing the engraved silver band on her. Left hand real, not a contract, not a scheme. Hers behind her, the city stretched awake. But all she could focus on was the man walking toward her, Adrien, in a charcoal gray suit, his tie already loosened, eyes soft with something that still made her breath catch. You're supposed to wait until the ceremony, she teased. Adrien didn't smile. He just took her face in his hands, his thumb brushing the apple of her cheek. I needed to see you. The raw honesty in his voice unraveled her. She leaned into his touch, nervous, terrified. His laugh was rough. But not about the wedding, then what? His gaze dropped to her lips, then back up, holding hers with devastating intensity. That I'll wake up and this will have been a dream. Isla's heart cracked open. She pressed her palm over his chest, feeling the steady, strong beat beneath. I'm not going anywhere, Adrien exhaled, resting his forehead against hers. Promise? She kissed him instead of answering, slow, deep, pouring every unspoken vow into it when they pulled apart. His eyes were darker, his hands trembling where they gripped her waist. Later, she whispered, nipping at his jaw. We have a lifetime of laters now. Ceremony they married under a canopy of twinkling lights, surrounded by the people who had stood by them. Marcus grinning like a fool, Illa's mother dabbing. At her eyes, even the Wolf Industries staff, clinking champagne flutes. Adrien barely heard the officiant. All he saw was Illa, her wild curls half-tamed beneath a delicate veil, her smile brighter than the city's skyline behind her. When it was time for vows, he didn't reach for the notes in his pocket. I spent years building walls, he said, voice low. Then you walked through them like they were nothing. Illa's lips parted, her eyes glistening. You were the risk I never wanted to take, he continued, threading their fingers together. And the only one that ever mattered. Gosh. She squeezed his hand, her own voice thick. And you were the man who called an ambulance for a stranger 10 years ago. Adrien froze. Illa smiled through tears. You saved my mother. You saved me long before we ever met. The truth settled over him like sunlight. Fate. This was fate. He kissed her before the officiant could announce it, lifting her off her feet as their guests cheered. The wedding night Adrien carried over the threshold of their penthouse, her laughter muffled against his neck. Still showing off, Wolf? He kicked the door shut, pressing her against it. You love it, Ela. Hooked a leg around his waist, her fingers working his tie loose. I love you. The words, so easy now, still made his chest tighten. He kissed her, deeply walking them toward the bedroom, her dress slipping from her shoulders like water. Later, tangled in sheets, her head on his chest, Adrien traced idle patterns down her spine. Tell me again, he murmured. Isla propped herself up on an elbow, her hair a riot of curls around her face. I love you. He cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing her bottom lip. Again, she laughed, kissing him. Love you, Adrien Wolf. Good. He rolled her beneath him, his mouth finding the spot on her neck that made her gasp. Because you're stuck with me. Epilogue. 1 year later. Sign outside the redesigned headquarters gleamed in the morning light. Wolf and Rivera architects inside. Isla stood in the sunlit atrium, her hand resting on the slight swell of her stomach, watching as Adrien crouched to show a group of schoolchildren a blueprint. His voice was patient, his smile effortless. The man she'd once called Ice now. Warm as summer, one of the kids pointed to her. Is that your wife? Adrien turned, his gaze finding hers across the room. Yeah, he said softly. That's my whole world. Isla blew him a kiss, and for the first time in his life, Adrien Wolf knew this was the design he'd been meant to build all along.